young immigrant shepherd girl disappeared without a trace during a herding trip in the Rocky Mountains, gone as if the wilderness had swallowed her whole. No clues, no goodbye. But 22 years later, her father returns to that same remote location, and what he finds finally reveals the chilling truth about what really happened that day. It was just before sunrise, and the Wyoming sky was a soft gray as Miguel Santos went about his usual chores at the Whitaker Livestock and Wool Farm. At 55, his hands bore the calluses of decades spent among sheep, fences, and lonely fields, the same fields that had become his home, and a constant reminder of what he'd lost. Rock Hollow, Wyoming, sits quietly beneath the Wind River Range, the kind of place shaped by generations of herders and a wool economy tied to the land. With its simple gravel roads and modest buildings, the town clings to tradition like a child to a parent, charming on the surface but hiding stories few outsiders ever hear. Miguel was repairing a broken fence near the barn when his satellite phone buzzed, loud and sharp in the cold morning stillness. The sheep nearby stirred uneasily. He saw the name flash on the screen, Harold Whitaker. "Miguel, thank God you answered." Harold's voice crackled with urgency. Miguel stood upright, instantly alert. "What's going on, Harold? It's barely 5:30. I need you to take the herd up to Sheephorn Mountain. Today. Right now." Miguel paused, setting down his tools. "Now?" "I'm in the middle of fixing the north fence. The storm last night tore up 2 panels, and they'll fall if I don't." "The fence can wait," Harold cut in. "Tom called out sick. He was supposed to lead the herd this morning, and I can't get anyone else on such short notice. You know how critical it is to reach the high meadow while the weather holds." Miguel felt a knot tighten in his gut. The high country, after all these years. Harold was asking him to return to the very place where everything had fallen apart. "Harold, you know I haven't done a mountain run since." He didn't need to finish. They both knew. "I know," Harold said, his tone softening. "I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. You're the best shepherd we have, even if you haven't climbed those trails in a while. Honestly, you're the only one I'd trust with this herd." Miguel closed his eyes. The grief came back like a fog. The last time he'd gone up there alone was nearly a decade ago, and it had gone badly. The moment he'd reached the meadow, he'd started seeing her. Lucia, just 9 years old when she vanished. Her shadow flitting between the sheep, her laughter bouncing off the cliffs. He'd been so thrown off, he almost stepped over the edge of a ravine, saved only by his dog's frantic barking. Since then, Miguel had kept to the lower fields. Harold never pushed him. He understood that some wounds don't heal with time. They just learn to stay quiet. But Miguel had never stopped waiting. Part of him still believed that maybe, just maybe, one day Lucia would come back to Rock Hollow, the only place she ever called home. "The others don't know the terrain like you do," Harold said. "And Tom wasn't just taking them to the lower pasture. It's Sheephorn Meadow. You know how tricky that trail can be." Miguel looked up at the distant peaks now glowing gold in the early light. Somewhere up there, 22 years ago, his daughter had vanished. Despite search teams, police efforts, and his own endless searching, there had never been a single sign. Lucia Santos was simply gone. "You still there, Miguel?" "Yeah," he muttered, rubbing his forehead. The tension headache had already begun. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this. What if I lose control again?" "Then I'll make it simple," Harold offered. "Take the truck. No long hike. Just drive as far as the trail allows, set up camp, and get the herd settled. You'll be back tomorrow, one night." That changed things. Back when Miguel first worked for Harold, everything was done on foot, the old shepherd paths, winding through the mountains like veins. But things had changed. Trucks now did part of the work. It saved time. It made it easier. And maybe, just maybe, it gave Miguel a chance. Not just to take the herd, but to face what he'd never been able to leave behind. Miguel glanced at the penned sheep, 23 in total, all restless and waiting to begin their climb to the mountain pastures. The timing was critical. The rich alpine grass they needed only grew for a short window each year. Go too early, and they'd be caught in the tail end of spring storms. Go too late, and the grass would wither under summer's dry heat. "This is just a one-time thing, right?" Miguel asked, already knowing his answer. He was going to say yes. Harold had been more than just a boss. When Miguel arrived in the U.S. with nothing but a young daughter and hope, it was Harold who offered him a job, who helped him get his work visa, who later sponsored his green card and, eventually, his path to becoming a citizen. Miguel owed him everything. One time, Harold confirmed, "And I mean it, Miguel. I wouldn't ask if I had anyone else." Miguel looked from the broken fence to the penned sheep, then lifted his gaze toward the peaks that had haunted him for over 2 decades. Somewhere up there, in those cold winds and green meadows, the last trace of his little girl had been lost. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll do it. Thank you, Miguel. I mean that." As the call ended, Miguel stood still for a moment, taking in the sound of soft bleating from the pen and the whisper of wind moving through the pines. 22 years ago, he dreamed of something different, moving to a city, giving Lucia every opportunity this country could offer. But how could he ever leave Rock Hollow, when there was always a chance she might find her way back? He headed toward the shed, retrieved the keys to the old Ford pickup, beat up but reliable, and got to work. It took nearly an hour to load the portable fencing and the basic camping gear. By the time he was guiding the sheep into the truck's livestock bay, the sun had fully risen above the ridgeline. As he locked the final gate, Miguel felt the weight of time settle on him. Back when he and Lucia had first arrived from Peru, even the simplest things in America felt futuristic. Trucks, GPS, satellite phones. Even shepherding had evolved. He'd once been proud of adapting to this new world. Now, he wondered if all that progress could ever fill the space his daughter left behind. He'd mastered English, earned citizenship, and built a name for himself as one of the most trusted ranch workers in the region. But none of it could silence the quiet that greeted him every night when he opened the front door to an empty house, or the silence that followed when he paused, still half expecting the sound of her voice calling out. The drive into the mountains took just under 3 hours, a winding ascent along narrowing roads. Finally, he reached the last spot a vehicle could go, a clearing often used by shepherds and hikers alike. Miguel parked, stepped out, and began unloading his gear. The trail to Sheephorn Meadow wasn't long, but it was steep. As he hiked, guiding his flock along a path he'd once known by heart, he noticed storm clouds gathering fast over the western peaks. Typical mountain weather, clear one moment, wild the next. He pushed his pace. He needed shelter before the rain hit. Halfway up, he spotted the stone shelter, a small granite hut built decades ago by shepherds who understood the mountain's moods. It had survived storms, winters, even avalanches. As Miguel finally reached the upper meadow, the view opened before him like something out of a forgotten story, lush, green, endless. This had always been sacred ground for shepherds. The air up here was thinner, purer. Snow-fed streams kept the grass vibrant, even in dry years. But something was different. As he crested the final hill, Miguel stopped cold. Across the far edge of the meadow was another flock, massive in comparison to his modest 23 sheep. From this distance, he could count hundreds. And they weren't alone. At least a dozen workers moved among them, far more than any local shepherding crew ever needed. Miguel narrowed his eyes. In all his years here, he'd rarely seen anything like it. Most herders in this region worked alone or in pairs. This looked industrial, something far bigger and far less familiar. As the first drops of rain began to fall, Miguel turned toward the stone hut. It was exactly as he remembered, built from massive granite blocks, fitted together with precision, no cement, no nails, just stone and time. He led his sheep toward it, his mind still uneasy. Something about that other operation didn't sit right. And in this place, with its deep echoes of the past, Miguel knew better than to ignore instincts. Miguel stepped up to the heavy wooden door of the old shepherd's shelter and knocked, following the quiet traditions long upheld by those who worked the mountain trails. The door creaked open to reveal a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s. Pale blue eyes stared out from beneath a sun-worn cowboy hat, and the moment he saw Miguel, his expression turned cold. His gaze swept over Miguel's clothes, then lingered, not kindly, on the fact that Miguel didn't look like a local. "What do you want?" the man asked flatly, his voice marked by the accent of someone born and raised in those mountains. "I was hoping to stay here for the night," Miguel replied evenly. His English was fluent, though touched by the accent he'd carried since childhood. "Weather's changing fast, and I've got sheep that need shelter." The man's frown deepened. "That's not gonna happen," he said, voice firm. "I got here first, and this hut's mine. You'll need to take your flock somewhere else." Miguel had been around long enough to know that territory disputes between shepherds weren't unusual, but something in this man's tone went beyond that, beyond normal boundary friction. "I get that you arrived first," Miguel said calmly, "but there's plenty of space in the meadow. The hut's big enough to share." The man stepped forward, now just a few feet away. His stare was hard and unwelcoming. "This shelter was built by my grandfather," he said, his voice laced with something sharper than pride. "It's family tradition, not a place for hired hands from tiny outfits, especially not ones who weren't born here." Miguel stiffened. The message was clear. This wasn't just about sheep or shelter. It was personal. His appearance, his accent, his very presence had triggered a kind of instant judgment. The man had already made up his mind about him. "I'm not here to cause problems," Miguel said, keeping his voice steady. "I just want to keep my animals safe from the storm." The man shook his head. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before dragging sick livestock up this way. Find another place to sleep." With that, the man slammed the door shut. Miguel stood there for a moment in the light rain, letting the sting of the exchange pass. Then he turned and quietly led his small flock about 100 yards from the hut to a flatter patch of ground. He worked quickly, setting up his emergency shelter. It wasn't much, just a tent and fencing, but it would do. As he worked, he glanced again toward the other operation spread across the far side of the meadow. The herd was massive, easily 300 or 400 sheep, and required constant attention from a team of at least a dozen workers. But it wasn't the size that unsettled him. It was the workers themselves. He could hear voices carried by the wind, Spanish, something that sounded like Portuguese, maybe even other languages. These weren't locals. They were like him, immigrants, laborers brought in to handle the physical work of a large-scale outfit. Miguel waved to one of them, a woman working near the boundary between their two herds. She looked to be in her 30s, with the sun-hardened face of someone who had spent years outside. She glanced toward him, seemed about to return the gesture, when suddenly the stone hut door flew open again. The man from before, the one the workers had called Mr. Cyrus, stormed out and raised his voice loud enough for the whole meadow to hear. "Keep those sheep away from his," he barked, jabbing a finger toward Miguel. "I don't want them mixing with ours, and none of you are to talk to him. Understood?" Miguel froze. It wasn't just the command. It was the tone, the assumptions, the idea that his animals didn't belong, that he didn't belong. The sheep he'd raised and cared for were in perfect health. Anyone with experience could see that. But this wasn't about health. This was about status and power. The workers moved fast, guiding their herd away from his, adjusting fencing with practiced precision. It was clear they were used to following orders. The woman Miguel had waved to earlier began rounding up her sheep too, but before turning away, she met his eyes again. Her expression lingered, conflicted. Cyrus slammed the door once more, and the sound echoed like a warning shot across the empty slope, startling several sheep from their grazing. Miguel turned back toward his modest setup, but just a few minutes later, he noticed something strange. The same woman, now joined by another, slightly older, was waving at him from across the field. Not just a casual wave this time, but a deliberate signal, like she wanted his attention. Both women were glancing toward the hut, as if making sure they weren't being watched. Still shaken by the confrontation, but curious, Miguel double-checked the fence around his flock and began walking slowly toward them. As Miguel approached, he got a clearer look at the two women. The younger one, likely in her 30s, wore her dark hair in a no-nonsense ponytail and had the practical, worn clothes of someone used to hard outdoor labor. The older woman looked to be a few years ahead of her, late 30s maybe, with a face marked by sun and wind, and a posture that suggested she'd learned to stay alert. "Hola," Miguel said gently in Spanish, hoping they might feel more at ease in a familiar language. The younger woman smiled and answered in English, her words accented but clear. "Hello, I'm Anna. This is Tira." She gestured to her companion, who gave a polite nod. "I'm Miguel," he replied, switching to English as well. "I'm sorry about what happened earlier, with your supervisor." Anna's smile faded slightly. "Yes, sorry. He can be difficult, but he has many sheep to care for. It makes him stressed." Miguel nodded. He understood stress, but he also knew it wasn't an excuse for how Cyrus had acted. "I get it," he said neutrally, "and I can see you've got a big herd to manage. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just needed shelter from the storm." Tira spoke up for the first time, her voice quiet but warm. "We don't mind sharing. Meadow has space for all." Miguel felt genuine relief. "Thank you," he said. "Where are you both from?" "I live in Rock Hollow," he added after a pause. "Just on the other side of the range. One of our regulars couldn't make the trip this time, so I filled in. It's been years since I've come this far up." The women exchanged a subtle glance. Then Anna answered, "We are from Silver Ridge. It's a town not far from here." Miguel nodded. "I know it. Been through a few times. Bigger than Rock Hollow, but still small. What farm do you work for?" This time, they didn't respond right away. Miguel noticed how their expressions shifted, not quite guarded, but uncertain. "Silver Ridge has many farms," Anna said vaguely. Miguel recognized the sidestep, but didn't press. Something about their body language told him to let it go. "Well," he said, preparing to leave, "I should get back to my sheep. But are you both okay? I mean, really okay? If something isn't right, if you need help?" Anna and Tira shook their heads almost in unison. "Life is hard," Anna said carefully, "but this is better than what many people have." The words hit Miguel unexpectedly deep. It was nearly the same phrase he had used with Lucia years ago, back when they first arrived from Peru. Whenever she complained about their small-town life, their cramped living, the endless work, he'd say, "We should be thankful. Many people don't have even this. We have work. We have safety. We're building something." Hearing that sentiment now, from someone else, in a place so tied to his past, it struck a chord. Anna noticed his silence. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern flickering in her voice. Miguel gave a small smile. "I'm fine," he said softly. "Just tired from the climb." But as Anna moved her hand gently near his face, a simple gesture of care, Miguel caught sight of her fingers, her smile, the shape of her eyes. For just a second, something in her expression reminded him of Lucia. It stopped him cold. But no, it couldn't be. Just memories playing tricks on him in a place where grief always felt close. Before he could say anything more, the door of the stone shelter flew open again. Cyrus stormed out, face dark with fury, His boots splashed through the mud as he crossed the field with purpose. "What did I say about talking to him?" he shouted, shoving Miguel in the shoulder hard enough to make him step back. "Get back to your own herd. Now." Then he turned on Ana and Tira, his tone cutting. "You two know better. Back to work. No more chatting." Miguel steadied himself and stepped forward. "I don't know what your issue is with me. I haven't been up here in years. I didn't know you'd be using this land. There's no reason we can't share the meadow." Cyrus leaned in, his face inches from Miguel's. "My problem is folks who don't understand the rules up here." Before he could finish, a long roll of thunder cut across the valley, echoing through the mountains. They all looked up as the sky, once threatening, now turned fully ominous. Cyrus pulled back, practicality overtaking anger. "Pack it up!" he barked at his crew. "We're going down before this storm traps us." Miguel watched as Ana and Tira responded immediately, echoing, "Yes, Mr. Cyrus," before hurrying back toward their flock. The workers fell into motion fast, collapsing fencing, loading gear, guiding sheep with practiced coordination. Rain started to fall harder now, sheets of it cutting across the alpine meadow. Miguel stood still as Cyrus and the crew disappeared into the mist, their massive herd flowing behind them like a white wave in the fog. He watched until the last tail vanished over the ridge. Only then did he turn back to his own sheep, huddled tightly, already seeking shelter from the storm. He checked the fence one last time, sturdy enough, for now. Then, glancing again at the silent hut, he made up his mind. It wasn't private property. That structure had been used by shepherds for generations. It was a public refuge, built for safety, not ownership. "Refugio de todos," Miguel whispered to himself as he walked toward the shelter door. Rainwater dripped steadily from Miguel's hat and coat as he pushed open the door to the old stone hut. The interior was just as he remembered, simple, spare, built for survival. A narrow wooden bed frame rested against the back wall. A small stone fireplace sat cold and empty. Beside it, a wooden table and 2 chairs. Someone had left a neat stack of firewood near the hearth, a gesture of kindness left behind by a shepherd before him. He hung his soaked jacket on a peg by the door and crouched near the fireplace, striking a match and feeding a small flame until it took hold. Warmth returned to the room slowly, mixing with the familiar scent of damp wool and wood smoke, smells that brought memories rushing back faster than he could stop them. As he laid out his simple supplies, bread, cheese, water, something on the wooden table caught his eye. At first it was just a scratch in the surface, but as he looked closer, his heart skipped. Carved carefully into the wood was a small flower with 6 distinct petals. Beneath it, 2 letters. L.S. Miguel's breath caught in his throat. "No," he whispered, reaching out to touch it. His fingers hovered above the carving, then slowly traced the lines. It couldn't be, but it was. The exact same flower Lucia used to draw everywhere, on tree trunks, on scrap wood, even etched into her school notebooks, a signature of childhood innocence. She was here, Miguel said aloud, the realization hitting like a thunderclap. Not in theory, not in hope. Here, in this hut, at some point after she vanished. He stood quickly, scanning the room for anything else. Near the bed, tucked in the shadows, he spotted something. Kneeling, he reached out and picked up a small object buried beneath a layer of dust and time. A broken dream catcher. Its threads were faded. Some beads had fallen away. But Miguel knew it instantly. Lucia had been fascinated by dream catchers. She'd learned how to make them from a kind-hearted artisan who visited Rock Hollow every month. The same blue and red threads, the same style of weave she always used. Miguel sat back on his heels, the fragile circle trembling in his hands. This wasn't coincidence. This was confirmation. Not only had she been here, she'd left pieces of herself behind. His hands shaking, Miguel reached for his satellite phone. the kind ranchers use in isolated areas where regular service doesn't reach. He didn't hesitate. He called Harold. The line clicked, then crackled. "Miguel, everything all right up there?" "No," Miguel said, pacing the floor. "I have to leave. Someone has to come get the sheep." "What?" "Miguel, slow down. What are you talking about?" "I found something. In the old hut." Lucia's initials carved into the table. "A dream catcher she made." "She was here, Harold. I know it." There was silence on the line. Then, "Are you sure? It's been over 2 decades." "I'm sure," Miguel cut in. "I know her work. I'm telling you, she was in this hut." "Miguel, I don't have anyone else who can get up there right now." "Then come yourself," Miguel snapped, voice rising. "I've worked for you for 22 years without asking for anything. I'm asking now." There was another pause. "The sheep are fenced in. They'll be fine overnight," Miguel continued. "I'm at Sheephorn Meadow, by the old hut. I'll explain everything later." And with that, he ended the call. He didn't wait for permission. There wasn't time. Miguel grabbed only the essentials: the dream catcher, his phone, and a few supplies. One last look at the carved initials. Then he stepped out into the downpour once more. The mountain trail had become slick and dangerous, but Miguel didn't care. He moved carefully but quickly, slipping at times, catching himself, never stopping. His clothes clung to him, soaked through. His boots were heavy with mud, but none of it registered. His mind raced with one thought. If Cyrus had claimed that hut, maybe he knew something. Maybe he'd seen her. Maybe... By the time Miguel reached his truck, he was drenched and shivering. He fired up the engine and turned the wheels toward Silver Ridge, the town Anna and Tira had said they were from, the same place Cyrus was likely based. If that hut really did belong to Cyrus's family, there was a chance, a real chance, he held pieces of the truth. Miguel gripped the steering wheel tightly as the truck wound through narrow roads carved into the mountains. Rain lashed the windshield. Fog clung to the trees like smoke. But for the first time in 22 years, Miguel didn't feel lost. He felt hope. About 20 minutes into the descent, the rain eased to a misty drizzle, though visibility was still poor. His headlights barely lit the road ahead, cutting narrow beams through thick mountain fog. That's when he saw them. 2 figures by the roadside, a woman and a child. The older woman had silver hair plastered to her face from the rain. The child beside her looked no older than 10. Both were soaked, standing on the shoulder of the road with one thumb extended in silent request. Miguel's instinct was to keep driving. He didn't have time. He was chasing something he'd waited his whole life to find. Every second counted. But as his headlights fully illuminated their faces, tired, drenched, and hopeful, he knew he couldn't leave them behind. He slowed the truck, rolled down the window, and leaned out into the rain. "Where are you headed?" he asked. The woman stepped forward, shielding the young girl beneath a wind-wrecked umbrella that flapped uselessly at her side. "We're headed to Silver Ridge," she called, her voice tired but kind. "Just trying to get home." "I'm going there too," Miguel said. "Do you need a ride?" "Oh, would you? That would be such a blessing," she replied, relief washing over her face. "We live on Pinehurst Avenue," she added, as Miguel leaned over to unlock the passenger doors. She helped the girl into the back seat, then climbed in herself. Both of them were soaked through. "I'm sorry I don't have any blankets," Miguel said, turning the heater up to full blast. "I wasn't expecting company. I'm just a shepherd heading into town." "No need to apologize," the woman said, removing the child's jacket and draping it over her lap. "We're grateful for the ride. I'm Edith Holloway, and this is my granddaughter, Mara." "Miguel Santos," he replied, easing the truck back onto the road. "What were you doing out here in this weather?" "We were picking fruit at the Johnson's orchard," Edith explained, gently rubbing Mara's small hands between hers to warm them. "Didn't expect the rain to turn so fast." Mara let out a soft sneeze. and Edith wrapped an arm around her protectively. I hope you don't catch a cold, sweetie. We've got so much to do tomorrow. I don't want to be sick for my birthday, Mara sniffled. Miguel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Tomorrow's your birthday? She nodded. I'll be 11. Grandma and I are making shepherd's pies for all our neighbors. We'll bake tonight if you're feeling up to it, Edith said, smoothing the girl's damp hair with a smile. Miguel returned the smile. Happy early birthday, Mara. Thank you, she beamed. Would you like to come over tomorrow for lunch or dinner? We always make extra shepherd's pie. Miguel was touched by the invitation. That's very kind of you. But I'm just visiting, not from Silver Ridge. Oh? Edith asked. Well, it's a small town. Who are you visiting? I might know them, unless they're new, of course. Miguel hesitated, then answered. His name's Cyrus. I don't know the address. We haven't seen each other in years. I thought I'd surprise him. Edith raised her eyebrows and laughed. You're in luck, then. There's only one Cyrus in Silver Ridge, and he's our neighbor. Miguel blinked. Really? Cyrus Brackenridge, she said, clearly amused. He owns the Brackenridge Farm, biggest livestock operation in the county. We were just talking about him. Miguel tried not to show his surprise. He's a generous man, Edith continued. Employs half the town. Sponsors the Harvest Festival every fall. Miguel didn't speak, trying to reconcile this description with the cold-eyed man he'd encountered on the mountain. He could live anywhere, Edith added, but he chooses to stay right here, says he likes being part of a real community. Miguel forced a polite nod. Sounds like quite a man. Oh, he is, Edith said, unaware of the tension tightening in his jaw. Tough but fair. Folks respect him. As they drove through Silver Ridge, Miguel watched the landscape shift from well-lit shops and manicured storefronts to older, humbler houses. Soon they pulled into a small cul-de-sac lined with modest homes. Edith pointed as they approached a house with a wide front porch. This is us, she said. Thank you again, Miguel. Of course, he replied. Which one's Cyrus's? She gestured to a house at the end of the street, larger than the others, but still unassuming. That one. Doesn't look like he's home yet. She paused, then smiled again. Would you like to come in and wait? I can make you some coffee. No, thank you, Miguel said. I'll wait in the truck. Edith nodded and guided Mara toward the house. As the door closed behind them, Miguel stayed in the driver's seat, heater running, eyes fixed on Cyrus's house. The rain beat a steady rhythm on the roof as he sat, turning over every word he planned to say. His satellite phone buzzed, probably Harold, calling about the sheep he'd left behind. Miguel let it ring. It didn't matter now. A few minutes later, a pair of headlights cut through the mist. A black pickup rolled into the cul-de-sac, turning into the driveway of the corner house. Miguel sat up straighter. It was the same truck he'd seen parked near the hut on the mountain. The vehicle stopped, and a moment later, Cyrus stepped out. Collar up against the rain. No hesitation. Miguel climbed out and crossed the street. Cyrus, he called. The man stopped, turning. Recognition flickered, quickly followed by irritation. You? Cyrus's voice sharpened. What are you doing at my house? Miguel kept his hands open, his voice calm. I'm sorry to show up like this, but I need to ask you something important. Cyrus didn't move. His keys dangled in his hand like something he wasn't sure he'd use to open the door, or hold tighter just in case. How did you even find me? He demanded. After you left the mountain, I went into the hut, Miguel said quickly. I found something. A carving on the table. A flower with the initials LS. Cyrus narrowed his eyes. You followed me here to ask about some scratches on a table? Are you serious? Miguel took a step closer, his voice steady despite the rain running down his face. They're not just scratches, he said. Miguel's voice rose despite his best efforts to remain composed. That flower, my daughter carved that. Lucia Santos. She disappeared 22 years ago, right there in Sheephorn Meadow. Something shifted in Cyrus's eyes. A flicker of recognition, surprise, annoyance. Miguel couldn't tell. Whatever it was, it vanished as quickly as it came. "Look," Cyrus said, stepping toward his front door. "I'm tired. I'm soaked. I've got things to do. Whatever happened to your daughter back then, that's got nothing to do with me." "But the carving? I don't care about a carving," Cyrus snapped. "That hut's been used by hundreds of shepherds. Anyone could have scratched something into that table." Miguel shook his head. "It's her symbol. She used to carve it into everything. Fence posts, trees, old crates. And I found one of her dream catchers, too. She made them by hand." "This conversation's over," Cyrus said flatly. "It's cold, it's raining, and I'm going inside. If I see you on my property again, I'm calling the police. Got it?" Before Miguel could respond, Cyrus turned and slammed the door behind him. Miguel stood there a moment longer, rain running down his face, fists clenched at his sides. "Proud, bitter man," he muttered under his breath. He walked back to his truck, frustration and disappointment weighing heavier than the storm clouds overhead. But as he sat behind the wheel again, Miguel's mind returned to the symbol on the table. He was certain it hadn't been there when he last visited the hut years ago, nor during that desperate first search 2 decades earlier, which meant it had appeared later, recently perhaps. It had to be Lucia's. He glanced at Cyrus's truck, parked just ahead. On the back window was a logo he hadn't noticed earlier, a stylized sheep encircled by the words Bracken Ridge Heritage Livestock. Miguel started the engine. Maybe tomorrow he could return and try again, or better yet, visit the farm directly, a place where Cyrus might be less guarded with others nearby. Just as he was about to leave, he saw movement from the house next door. Edith had stepped out onto her porch, waving. He rolled down the window as she approached, bundled in a raincoat. "Did you miss your friend?" she asked, glancing toward Cyrus's home. "No, I saw him," Miguel replied carefully. "It just wasn't the best time." She nodded knowingly. "Ah, yes, he's always rushing somewhere, barely stops moving, even at home." "The farm? Is it far from here?" Miguel asked, seizing the moment. "I don't know my way around town." "Oh, not far," she said. "Why don't you come in for a minute? I can show you on a map." This time, Miguel accepted. Inside, the house was warm and inviting. Mara was already lining up ingredients on the kitchen counter, ready to start baking. Edith fetched a map from a drawer and spread it on the table. "Here we are," she said, circling their location. Then she traced her finger eastward. "And this is Bracken Ridge Farm, about 15 minutes from town. Biggest operation around here." "Thank you," Miguel said sincerely as she folded the map. "Keep it," she offered with a smile. "I've lived here my whole life. I don't need it." From the kitchen, Mara chimed in cheerfully. "We're starting the pies now, birthday pies." Miguel smiled at her excitement. "I should let you two get to baking." "Don't forget about tomorrow," Edith reminded him as she walked him to the door. "If you're still in town, we'd love to have you over." "You're very kind," Miguel said. "Thank you for everything." As he drove away, he glanced at Cyrus's house one more time. He didn't know when or how, but deep down, he was sure. Cyrus held answers, and thanks to Edith, Miguel now knew exactly where to go next. Following the map, Miguel navigated through the unfamiliar streets of Silver Ridge. The town was larger than Rock Hollow, with more storefronts and city infrastructure. But it still felt close-knit, a place where everyone seemed to know each other. He had originally planned to speak to Cyrus again, maybe the next day. But now, he thought, a visit to the farm might be more productive. With others around, perhaps Cyrus would be less defensive, maybe even willing to talk. "I should apologize," Miguel murmured to himself as he drove. Showing up at his house, it wasn't right. The storm, the stress, it put everyone on edge. Just then, A black pickup sped past him. The Bracken Ridge logo flashed on the rear window. Miguel straightened. Cyrus. The truck was weaving through traffic with unusual urgency. Instinctively, Miguel accelerated, not to confront him, but to follow, quietly, from a distance. He stayed a few car lengths behind, careful not to be noticed. For several minutes, he tracked the truck through winding side streets and past intersections. Then, at a red light, he found himself directly behind Cyrus. For a brief moment, both vehicles sat still. Cyrus glanced in his rearview mirror. Their eyes met. Miguel saw the flash of recognition, and something else. The light turned green. Cyrus gunned the engine, tires squealing as the truck peeled right, making a sudden sharp turn onto a side street. Cyrus made another abrupt turn, then a second, this time veering left, clearly trying to lose anyone tailing him. Miguel did his best to keep up, but his unfamiliarity with Silver Ridge's side streets put him at a disadvantage. After several quick turns, he suddenly found himself on an empty road, with no sign of the black pickup in sight. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling over and grabbing the map Edith had given him. What is this man hiding? The way Cyrus had reacted, the urgency, the anger, only deepened Miguel's suspicion that he knew more about Lucia than he was letting on. Just then, Miguel's satellite phone rang. Harold's name lit up the screen. "Hello?" Miguel answered, still scanning the road as he began driving again. "Miguel?" Harold said, his voice sharp. "What is going on? I sent Rodriguez up to Sheephorn Meadow. He found the sheep alone. You can't just abandon a herd like that." "I know. I'm sorry, Harold," Miguel said quickly, "but I found something. I think Lucia might have been in that hut." There was a pause. "Evidence?" Harold asked, his tone softening. "Yes," Miguel said. "Her flower symbol, carved into the table, with her initials, just like she used to do, and I found one of her old dream catchers." Harold was quiet for a moment. "Miguel, I know how important this is to you. Do you know a farmer named Cyrus?" Miguel interrupted. "Cyrus Brackenridge. He says that hut belongs to his family." "The name sounds familiar," Harold replied. "They run a big operation, but I've never dealt with them directly. Why?" "I think he knows something. He's avoiding me, even called the police." Suddenly, flashing lights appeared in Miguel's rearview mirror. A police cruiser. "Harold, I have to go," he said abruptly. "Police." Miguel ended the call and pulled over, heart pounding. The officer approached, rain dripping off his cap. "License and registration, please." Miguel handed over his documents. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked. "You were on your phone while driving," the officer replied, "and we received a report that your vehicle was following someone, possibly harassing them." Miguel's jaw tightened. "I wasn't harassing anyone. I don't even live here. I was just trying to find my way." The officer narrowed his eyes. "Were you following a black pickup with a livestock logo?" "That driver was the one speeding," Miguel said. "Did you pull him over too?" "Sir, I need you to remain calm," the officer said, unmoved. "We've already spoken to the other party." The officer stepped back to his cruiser, ran Miguel's information, then returned. "Everything checks out," he said, handing back the license. "But this is a formal warning about phone use while driving, and a strong suggestion. Don't follow people. It won't be tolerated here. Are we clear?" "Yes, officer," Miguel replied, keeping his voice measured. As the cruiser drove away, Miguel sat in silence, watching the red taillights fade into the mist. Cyrus called the police, he thought. He's not just avoiding me. He's hiding something. After a moment of reflection, Miguel made a decision. He would no longer sneak around. He would go to Bracken Ridge Farm directly. If Cyrus refused to speak, Miguel would file a formal report. Let the authorities investigate. But first, he needed to see the place for himself. Guided by the map Edith had marked, Miguel drove to the outskirts of town. The rain had picked up again, and the hills beyond Silver Ridge were covered in low fog. Eventually, he reached a large property marked by a hand-painted sign, Bracken Ridge Heritage Livestock. He parked his truck at a respectful distance, just close enough to watch the main yard. It didn't take long. Cyrus's black pickup was there, parked near a large barn. Miguel spotted him emerging from one of the buildings, walking beside two familiar figures, Anna and Tira. Each woman carried a wooden crate, and they loaded them into the back of a box truck waiting in the gravel lot. Another man, large, with a shaved head, walked out to join them. Miguel watched as the two men climbed into the truck's cab, while Anna and Tira climbed into the back with the crates. The truck started and began pulling away, heading east, toward the same mountains that divided Silver Ridge from Rock Hollow. Curiosity, and a growing sense of unease, pushed Miguel to follow. He kept a safe distance as the vehicle left the main road and took a winding dirt track into the hills. Fog clung to the terrain. Rain pelted the windshield. The setting grew more isolated with every mile. Eventually, the truck pulled over in a clearing near the base of a steep incline. Miguel parked far enough back to stay hidden, then watched through the rain. Cyrus and the larger man stepped out and moved to the rear of the truck. They helped Anna and Tira climb down, the women still carrying their crates. They looked subdued. No talking, no smiles. Then, the group began hiking up a narrow path that disappeared into the rocks. Miguel waited a moment, then got out and followed on foot, ducking behind boulders and brush. The rain had soaked the trail, making it treacherous, but he moved quietly, keeping his distance. After about 10 minutes, the group stopped. Built into the side of the mountain was a strange structure, like a cave, but with a granite facade and a heavy wooden door. It looked hand-built, almost primitive, a dwelling, or a hideout. Miguel watched from behind a large rock as they entered. 15 minutes passed, then the door opened again. Cyrus and the other man stepped out, alone. The bigger man secured a heavy padlock on the door, checking it twice. Anna and Tira didn't come out. They started back down the narrow trail, unaware they were being watched. Miguel stayed low, moving carefully from one rock outcropping to another, but the terrain worked against him. A misstep sent a cascade of pebbles tumbling down the hillside. Cyrus froze. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice slicing through the mist. Miguel ducked lower, heart pounding. He tried to retreat, shifting silently between cover, but the terrain was too open, too exposed. Then, "There!" Cyrus's companion yelled, pointing toward a fallen tree. In an instant, both men charged toward him. Caught, Miguel stood his ground. Cyrus reached him first, face twisted in fury. "You again? What are you, some kind of undercover cop? Intelligence agent? You've been following me since the mountain." "I'm not with the police," Miguel said firmly. "I told you, I just want answers. About my daughter, about that symbol in your hut. And now I want to know, what are you doing with those women?" Cyrus glanced at the other man. Something silent passed between them. "You've seen too much," Cyrus muttered. "No more talking." They moved toward him. Miguel's instincts kicked in. He dropped into a defensive stance. Growing up in rural Peru, he'd learned to fight out of necessity. It wasn't something he ever sought, but some things the body never forgets. The larger man lunged. Miguel sidestepped cleanly and drove his elbow hard into the man's gut, then followed with a precise uppercut that sent him sprawling to the ground. But Cyrus was fast, faster than Miguel expected. He tackled him from the side, and both men went down, wrestling on the rain-slicked soil. Miguel struggled beneath him as Cyrus pinned him down and reached for something tucked into his belt. A knife. The blade caught the light for a second, a flash of cold steel. With a surge of adrenaline, Miguel twisted, throwing his weight and bucking hard. His hand landed on a rock, fist-sized, and as Cyrus raised the blade, Miguel swung. The rock connected with the side of Cyrus's head. Blood spattered as he collapsed, the knife falling from his hand. Breathing heavily, Miguel got to his feet. Both men lay unconscious. He retrieved his satellite phone, already programmed to connect to local emergency services, and quickly gave his location, explaining the situation. "I'll stay on site," he told them. "There are people inside. Please hurry." Then he turned toward the cave structure. He approached the wooden door, padlocked shut, and used the same rock that had just saved his life. Blow after blow until the lock finally snapped. The door creaked open. A wave of stench hit him. Rotting food, human waste, sweat, and something heavier. Despair. Miguel gagged, pulling his sleeve over his nose. "Anna? Tira?" he called into the dark. His eyes adjusted slowly. Inside, the space was damp, cramped, and filthy. The dirt floor was smeared with food scraps and waste. Against the far wall, several figures were huddled on soiled mattresses. He stepped closer. Anna and Tira were among them. There were 5 women total, all of them disoriented, their eyes glazed and unfocused. Miguel gently touched Anna's shoulder. Her head lolled to the side, her pupils wide, signs of sedation. "What did they do to you?" he whispered, moving between them to check their breathing, their pulses. They were alive, but barely. Then something on the wall caught his eye. Carvings, dozens of flower patterns, each one the same. 6 petals, the same flower Lucia had drawn as a child. Every carving marked with the same initials. LS. He looked down. Anna was still holding a small, sharp stone, a carving tool. At her feet, another flower had just been etched into the floor, interrupted mid-design. It hit him like a punch to the chest. Anna was Lucia. She'd been right here, all along. Since that very morning, she'd been speaking to him. She had known, she had remembered, and she'd been leaving signs, in the only way she could. Sirens echoed through the fog outside, growing louder. The narrow mountain road vibrated with the approach of vehicles. Miguel rushed outside, waving his arms to guide them in. 2 patrol cars and an ambulance pulled into the clearing, their lights casting red and blue shadows through the mist. "Over here!" Miguel shouted as the officers climbed out, hands near their holsters. "I'm the one who called," he said quickly. "The men are over there." He pointed toward where Cyrus and his partner still lay, unmoving. 2 officers moved to secure them, while others spread out around the perimeter. "They're alive," one officer confirmed, "but this one's bleeding heavily." A female officer approached. Her badge read Sergeant Reyes. "What happened here?" she asked. Miguel met her eyes. "Self-defense," he said simply, pulling up his sleeve to show the bruises forming. "And those women, they're not safe. They're inside. I think one of them is my daughter." Miguel looked down at the cuts on his hands and the stinging scrapes across his face. "They attacked me," he said, his voice steady. "When I discovered what they were doing. There are women inside that cave, immigrants, being held against their will." Sergeant Reyes didn't hesitate. She signaled to her team, and several officers moved swiftly toward the cave, flashlights drawn. Paramedics arrived next, working quickly to stabilize Cyrus and his accomplice. Reyes stepped forward and snapped one end of a pair of handcuffs onto Cyrus's wrist, locking the other to the stretcher frame. "These men are under arrest," she said firmly. Her partner did the same with the second man. Miguel stood back, watching the stretchers being carefully maneuvered down the slippery trail toward the waiting ambulance. Despite everything, there was no sense of triumph. His thoughts were only on the women inside, and Anna. "There are 5 women in there," he told Reyes. "They've been drugged. One of them—" He paused, his throat tightening. "One of them might be my daughter. She went missing 22 years ago." Sergeant Reyes's expression softened. "We'll get them out. We'll make sure they get help." Moments later, officers emerged from the cave, helping 5 women out into the fresh air. Anna and Tira were first, each supported by officers on either side. Behind them came 3 more women, all moving slowly, visibly weakened and confused. The sudden brightness, the open air, it overwhelmed them. They blinked and squinted, some covering their eyes. Paramedics wrapped each of them in blankets, speaking calmly, checking vitals. Miguel rushed to Anna's side as she was eased onto a stretcher. "Anna," he whispered, taking her hand gently. "You're safe now." Her eyes opened slightly, fluttering as she tried to focus. A medic monitoring her turned to Miguel. "They're all showing signs of strong sedation," he said. "We need to get them to the hospital. Fast." "I'm coming with her," Miguel said without hesitation. "Follow the ambulance in your vehicle," the medic said. "We're going to Silver Ridge Memorial. It's the closest hospital equipped for this." As the women were loaded into the ambulances, Reyes returned. "We're securing the scene," she told him. "We'll search the entire area. If there are other places like this, we'll find them." "Do you have any idea why he brought them here specifically?" Miguel shook his head. "No. I only followed Cyrus after I saw him moving Anna and Tira from his farm. Something just didn't feel right." Reyes nodded. "You trusted your instincts. Good call. We'll need a full statement, but that can wait until you're at the hospital. Go. I'll meet you there." Miguel nodded and hurried to his truck. He followed the ambulances slowly as they wound down the fog-covered mountain road. The red lights flashing ahead of him felt like a lifeline. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from the cold, not from the fight, but from what now seemed possible. Could Anna really be Lucia? The flower carvings, the dream catcher, the familiar gestures, the initials, LS, repeated again and again on the cave walls. The truth was still unfolding, but deep in his heart, Miguel knew. His daughter had never been gone. She'd been hidden, forced into silence, left in plain sight, on that very farm. He followed the flashing lights all the way to Silver Ridge Memorial, thoughts racing with every mile. From reluctantly accepting Harold's request to lead the herd that morning, to watching 5 women being rescued from captivity by nightfall, the day had turned into something no one could have predicted. At the emergency entrance, the ambulances were met by a flurry of doctors and nurses. Gurneys rolled inside. Miguel tried to follow Anna through the automatic doors, but a nurse gently stopped him. "Sir, I need you to wait here," she said kindly. "We need space for the doctors to work." Miguel nodded and stepped back, watching helplessly as the doors closed. He took a seat in the waiting area. The contrast was stark, from the cold, dirty cave to this sterile room of pale blue walls and antiseptic air. His boots were still caked in mud. His clothes smelled of rain and smoke. He stared at the floor, lost in the storm of his thoughts. What if I hadn't gone back up the mountain? What if I'd never noticed that carving? The guilt crept in slowly. Why did I stop visiting the hut 7 years ago? He thought. Why didn't I push harder, search deeper? His voice broke as he whispered, "I left her behind, twice. First when I chased after a stray sheep, then when I gave up on that place." 2 hours passed. Finally a doctor approached, middle-aged, kind eyes behind tired features. She carried a clipboard and spoke gently. "Are you the gentleman who came in with the women from the mountain?" Miguel stood immediately. "Yes. How are they?" "They're stable," she said with a calming smile. "All 5 were dehydrated, undernourished, and affected by some kind of sedative. We're still testing, but they're conscious now. They're going to recover." "Can I see Anna?" Miguel asked. The doctor checked her clipboard. "Room 212. Just for a few minutes. She needs rest." Miguel quietly thanked the doctor and hurried down the corridor, following the signs to the second floor. But when he reached room 212, he froze in the doorway, suddenly overwhelmed by doubt. What if I'm wrong? What if it's just a coincidence? He took a deep breath, knocked softly, and stepped inside. Anna was lying in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm, staring at the ceiling with a blank, faraway look. a stark contrast to the woman who had smiled and waved at him just that morning on the mountain. When she heard the door, she turned her head slightly. "The shepherd," she said quietly, recognition flickering in her eyes. "From the mountain." Miguel approached slowly. "Yes, we met earlier today. My name's Miguel." Ana gave a small nod, watching him carefully. "How are you feeling?" he asked, easing into the chair beside her bed. "Better," she murmured. "They said the medicine's helping. Whatever was in me, it's leaving." Miguel exhaled with visible relief. "That's good, really good." A silence settled between them. Then Miguel gathered the courage to speak. "I wanted to tell you what happened after we met," he said gently. "I got a ride from a woman named Edith. She lives near Cyrus. I tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. Then I saw him take you and Tira to that cave, and I followed." Anna's eyes widened. "You followed him? All that way?" Miguel nodded. "I had to. Something didn't feel right." He paused. Then, carefully, "I need to ask you something important. The flower carvings, with the initials LS. The ones in the cave and in the stone hut. Did you make those?" Anna's fingers twitched slightly against the blanket. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I've done that since I was little. But in the cave, I used them to count." "Count?" Miguel asked gently. "One carving for every time I was punished," she said, voice cracking. "For speaking out, for being kind, for showing anything Cyrus didn't like." Miguel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Anna, I used to have a daughter who carved that exact same flower. Same initials, LS Lucia Santos. She disappeared 22 years ago when she was 9. I went to find a lost sheep, and when I came back, she was gone." Anna stared at him, her breathing quickening. "Lucia Santos," she repeated softly, as if tasting the name on her tongue. "Yes," Miguel whispered. "My daughter." Her lips trembled. That was my name, before I became Anna." Miguel's heart felt like it might burst. "Lucia?" he asked, voice shaking. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks now. Are you my father?" "Yes," Miguel said, barely able to speak. "Yes, Lucia, I'm your father, Miguel Santos." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 2 decades of separation bridged in a single tearful gaze. Then Miguel rose from his chair and carefully wrapped his arms around her, minding the IV. Lucia clung to him, her body racked with sobs. "I thought you were dead," she cried into his shoulder. "He told me you were gone, that you died. I never stopped looking for you," Miguel whispered back, his own tears falling freely. "Never." They were still holding each other when Sergeant Reyes entered the room. She stopped short, taking in the emotional scene. Looks like I walked into something important," she said, clearly puzzled. Miguel turned toward her, one arm still around Lucia. "This is my daughter," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "She was taken 22 years ago. The woman you know as Anna is Lucia Santos." Reyes blinked, the weight of his words landing heavily. "You're certain?" Miguel nodded slowly. "The carvings, the initials, the dream catcher, they were hers. They've always been hers." Reyes pulled a chair close and opened her notebook. "Tell me everything," she said. And for the next half hour, Miguel and Lucia took turns filling in the gaps. Miguel explained the disappearance, the lost sheep, the empty hut, and how he had searched for years with no answers. Lucia recounted her memories, her voice gaining strength with every sentence. "He told me you fell from the mountain," she said quietly, "that a bad man pushed you. He said the same man was coming for me, and I had to hide." "In a bunker," Reyes repeated, eyebrows raised. "Where?" "Under the stone hut," Lucia said. "The entrance is hidden in the floor. I think it was originally a cold storage room for meat, but he made it bigger. He kept me there for days. And then? Reyes asked. Then we were in Silver Ridge. He said this would be my home now. He changed my name to Anna. Said it was safer. I was never allowed to go to school. He just kept me. Said I reminded him of his daughter, who he lost in a custody battle. Her hands trembled in her lap. At first, he acted like a father. He read to me, bought me toys. But as I got older, that changed. He started treating me like a worker. I lived in a bunkhouse, just like the others. No one knew. No one even asked. I slept in the staff housing with the others, Lucia said quietly. But I was lucky. Some of the workers who asked too many questions, they just disappeared. Sergeant Reyes looked up from her notes, her pen pausing. Do you know if there are more places like that cave? Anywhere else people might be held? Lucia nodded faintly. I was always taken to that cave for punishment, but I know there's a bunker beneath the stone hut. That's where Cyrus first hid me, and I've heard whispers. The other workers talk about places in the northern ridges, near Eagle Pass. I don't know the exact locations. Reyes immediately radioed the information to her team, issuing new search directives to investigate the hut and scout the other areas mentioned. Miguel turned toward Lucia, his voice soft. Why didn't you tell me who you were this morning? When we met, I asked if you needed help. Lucia gave him a tired smile. You used to tell me to always find the good in every situation, to be grateful, even when things were hard. Remember? You said that when I'd complain about Peru, or wish we lived in a big city instead of a farm. Miguel nodded, the memories coming back with painful clarity. I learned to survive with Cyrus, she continued. If I had told anyone, I thought it would only make things worse. I was one of the fortunate ones. I had my own bed. He made sure I looked normal, and no one questioned him. Everyone in Silver Ridge thought he was a generous boss, a pillar of the community. Miguel exhaled. Even Edith, the woman who helped me find him, she spoke of him like he was a hero. Reyes looked up from her notes. He fooled a lot of people, but not anymore. She closed her notebook. Cyrus and his partner are in custody, under guard at this hospital. He's still claiming the women were his staff, and that the cave was a quarantine space. But we've already found evidence proving otherwise. Confiscated ID cards, paper trails of workers who quit, but never made it home. We're building a solid case. Just then, a nurse stepped into the room, checking Lucia's vitals and adjusting her IV. I'm sorry, she said gently, but my patient needs rest. Reyes gave a small nod and rose from her chair. We'll continue tomorrow. Lucia looked up at the nurse. Can my father stay? The nurse hesitated, then nodded, her expression softening. For a little while. After Reyes stepped out, Miguel moved his chair closer to Lucia's bedside, his voice low and warm. I need to thank Edith properly tomorrow, he said. If she hadn't given me that map, I might never have found you. Is Tira okay? Lucia asked, concern flashing in her tired eyes. She's been my closest friend for years. She's all right, Miguel reassured her. The doctor said she's resting, just a few rooms away. She already spoke to the police. They'll take care of her too. Outside, the day had slipped quietly into evening. The rain still tapped gently against the window pane, but the worst of the storm had passed. Inside the small hospital room, Miguel held his daughter's hand and refused to let go, afraid that if he did, she might vanish all over again. I still can't believe I found you, he whispered. I never thought I'd see you again, Lucia replied, her voice barely audible now. Her eyes grew heavier, lulled by exhaustion and medication. All these years, I kept carving my initials, she murmured. I hoped someone would understand. Miguel smiled, eyes glistening. You did. You brought me straight to you. As her eyes fluttered shut, Miguel stayed beside her, just like he had when she was a child, silent, watchful, present. After 22 years of searching, of waiting when others told him to give up, of staying in Rock Hollow when opportunity called him elsewhere, Miguel Santos had finally found what he had never stopped believing was possible: his daughter, alive, safe, home. Outside, the clouds began to break. The storm that had drawn him back to the mountains cleared at last. One by one, stars began to appear over Silver Ridge.